Hey there, guys. Welcome back to the Pair Connection Podcast. You're here with Schuler and Andy from PILT Paranormal, and this is our first podcast of the 2020 year. Andy, you excited?
Oh, absolutely.
Good, man. Good.
Absolutely. I've been waiting.
I think tonight we're going to have a pretty good set out for what we're covering, Andy, which tonight's topics are...
Well, tonight we're going to be talking about haunted objects and haunted libraries.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, stereotypical, old-fashioned type of paranormal activity, right, Andy?
Absolutely.
So when it comes down to it, the old stereotype of libraries and haunted objects, I mean, I guess you can go straight to Ghostbusters. You know, when it comes to libraries, you think about the old witch down the aisle looking at a book and, you know, old history to it and all that stuff. And going back to libraries, actually PILT, our team, we were fortunate enough to actually investigate a library a couple times, once in 2017 and again in 2018. So Andy, when it comes down to, let's see, there's obviously a lot that can be a haunted object, or, you know, different types of categories and specters, entities, energies. But when you think haunted objects, what's the first thing that comes to your mind and why?
Well, one of the most common misconceptions of haunted objects is a lot of people actually will call them possessed objects, which is incorrect because objects cannot actually be possessed because they don't have a soul or an organic body to actually take possession of. So they're not possessed, they're haunted. And a haunted object is basically just an object that is being manipulated and moved by a spirit.
That's a good breakdown. I like that because I have heard that misconception, you know, of it being possessed compared to being haunted.
Right. I mean, a lot of people who they try to talk on this subject themselves and they will say possessed object. And possessed object is wrong. They're not possessed in any sense.
Okay. So with that being said, Andy, moving into the haunted objects category, when you hear that, what do you think? Well, what's the first type of category, if you will, that pops into your head?
Well, in my mind, whenever I hear haunted object, the first thing that pops into my mind is usually haunted dolls because they seem to be the most common. But there are really all sorts of haunted objects. There are dolls, there are toys, there are books, even like balls can be haunted. Even dishes and silverware, anything really. Any object that a spirit can actually, you know, have the energy to move can be haunted.
So even in today's society, Andy, like we could even have haunted cell phones, podcast mics, Xboxes, and TVs now. It doesn't have to be just old Victorian era type of mindsets, right? Like books and pins and stuff.
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. I mean, there are a vast amount of objects that can actually be haunted by spirit. And, you know, I mean, like you said, with today's day and age, with technology and things like that, yeah, I mean, there have been cases of electronics being haunted as well. Things like computers, TVs, cell phones, even things like blenders, microwaves, refrigerators, all sorts of things.
Ooh.
And I mean, I know with refrigerators, again, that goes into, you know, the whole Ghostbusters thing with like Gozer and all that, but
That's a good one, Andy.
you know, but yeah, there have been cases where, you know, there actually have been cases where, you know, that scene where the food is just flying out of her refrigerator.
Yes, I do recall
I
that.
mean, there are cases where that particular thing has happened. So that actually is not as far-fetched as most people would think.
Yeah. Yeah, it may not happen like exactly on TV or
No, I mean they're
movies,
not
but
gonna like the eggs are not gonna like crack on the counter and just automatically cook.
yeah, yeah.
But
That'd be kind of
you
cool
know,
and convenient
yeah,
if it was during breakfast time, but
yeah, yeah.
just saying.
I would
So
slap some bacon alongside that.
you might as well have it brought out, man. So Andy, what about the movie Christine, a haunted car?
Oh,
Is that
um,
possible too? You believe? Ghost
actually,
cars.
there have been cases of it.
Okay.
There have been cases of it in the past. So yes, I do believe it's possible. Not to the extent of that movie,
Yeah, yeah.
but there have been cases of, spirits hanging around in cars and things like that, and they like open doors for people, or they'll mess with the radio, or even like even like the brake and the gas pedal when someone's driving.
Wow.
They'll mess with that even. Like in The Entity. Have you seen that movie?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That one was
Okay.
kind of underrated in my opinion. I think it should have got a little more no, if you will, but I enjoyed it. It was pretty spooky.
Absolutely, because it's a true story.
Now that I did not know, Andy, it's based off of a single true story.
It absolutely is a true story, yeah. I
Wow.
mean, there are parts in it that are fabricated, of course, because it is a movie. But yeah, I mean, it's based on an actual thing that happened. Um,
Do you
where
know
this,
loosely of what it is, like the people and the story itself?
this woman, I don't know her name offhand. I used to, but I can't remember it now. For some reason, it escapes me. But she was haunted by an incubus,
Hmm.
and yeah, like all sorts of things happened to her, man. Like really, really bad things I don't even want to get into on the air.
Well,
But
just saying the whole word of incubus or even succubus, I think people kind of get that general idea of what that entity would be capable of.
exactly, exactly, it's not good.
So, Andy, was this correlated, this story from the movie The Entity and the true event? Did it go back to a haunted object? Or.
Um, I don't know if an actual object was the trigger for it or not. I don't believe so. I
Okay.
could be wrong, though. I could be wrong.
Yeah, I
But
know the original Entity movie came out in 1982, and I believe they made a remake of it in like 2009, 2010.
did they?
They did. Yeah, they had a remake.
I'm gonna
And
have to try and find that.
yeah, it was. Both of them, in my opinion, are creepy. But, going back to the haunted objects, I believe even with a malevolent, powerful entity such as the incubus and succubus, even those type of entities could be attached to something. Whether it came from a demonic ritual or whether it was from some teenager or person that dabbled in magic or something that they just didn't understand. I feel like they could manifest that type of creature into our world, into an object, and then whether or not that object's been cleansed or removed, it's going to be in that area where that object sits. So potentially it makes it dangerous.
You have a point there. That is absolutely 100% possible.
Yeah,
Um,
it's man.
Whether it actually pertains to the story of the entity, though, I don't know. I don't think she was really involved in any sort of black magic or anything like that.
Okay.
Um, it may have had something to do with a Ouija board. I don't fully remember. It's been so long. Like I'm trying to refer to the 1982 version of the movie, and it's
Yeah.
been forever. Like the new version you were talking about, I didn't even know that existed. So I'm gonna have to find that and see if I can refresh my memory.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but you made a really good point, Andy. Jump into it. Let's just say here, without doing the research and having a solid answer, the entity was based off an incident with a Ouija board. Again, just so we're not giving the Ouija board a bad rap, the board does not start off evil. It does not start off haunted. It is the intention of the user of what the board is done with. You can have it hanging on a wall, you can have it in your house, it's fine. But if you start using that object, in my opinion, like any object, to contact the spirit world, and you use that energy and that intention to contact a spiritual being, that is when that object, and we're talking about a Ouija board right now, can potentially become a haunted and attached object. Is that kind of correct there, Andy? Do you believe in that theory?
Actually, that is 100% correct.
Okay.
It all has to do with your intention, the energy that you pursue, the communication with. You know, it all depends on exactly what it is you're looking for at the time of communication. And if you go into it with bad intention, then obviously you're going to get bad results.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
absolutely. And sometimes I feel like if you go in there with an uneducated, unprotected mindset, it's kind of like, I forgive me. I keep using this reference every time, but it's kind of like opening up the doors to a Walmart, and the public can come in. Anybody can come in. You don't know who they are, you don't know what they've done, you don't know their intentions, but Walmart is a public place. Everyone's welcome to come buy food and medicine and stuff, and that's kind of what I feel like a Ouija board can do if you don't know what you're doing when contacting the spiritual world.
it's actually more like when you first walk into that Walmart in the summertime and you open up that door, and right away you feel this whoosh of air from the air conditioner.
Yeah.
When that air hits you, because as soon as you open that door and you open up that portal, you're not only, you know, walking in, but you're also letting things out, and you have to remember that.
Yeah.
You have to keep that in your mind at all times, because, you know, if you're able to walk in, then things are able to walk out as well.
That is a
And
very good point.
You have to protect yourself from that.
So, Andy, moving forward with haunted objects, let's say that you come across one. What would be, let's just water everything down. That's typically what we like to do with our podcast, is water things down for everyone, that even if you're, you know, a veteran in the paranormal world, it's always nice to kind of have that everyday comparison. If you were to come across a location, you know, that has a haunted object, or you have a haunted object given to you, what would be the first signs of indication that you have a haunted object? What would you look for?
Well, first of all, let me make it clear that if I was ever in a location with a haunted object, you wouldn't catch me anywhere near that. Homie, don't play that, okay?
You'd be going the other way, huh,
Right.
Andy?
Absolutely. But
Yeah, because if you got a spirit lingering around because they're attached to an object, you don't want to make them mad. It's like, okay, they obviously want to keep that, or there's something special. So,
yeah, one of the biggest signs to look for is movement.
Okay.
Especially in dolls. Like if a doll is moving from time to time, like let's say you don't necessarily see the movement, but you notice it and you know that no one's been around to actually move that doll, then chances are you've got a haunted object on your hands. Um, Now, and also let me point this out as well, because a haunted object could also fall under many categories as well. Like a haunted object could be haunted by a spirit who is attached to the object, but
Okay.
can also be attached, or it can also be haunted by a spirit who is not attached to the object. So,
Gotcha.
you have to really know which is which in order to know how to, you know, remove this spirit from the object itself, because the spirit could just be using the object as like a medium to, you know, communicate, but also could be attached to the object itself. but then
Okay.
again, maybe not. And you have to be able to know the difference. But yeah, I mean, one of the main things to look for is movement. So if something is mysteriously being found in like different locations of the house, and let's say you live alone and you know you didn't do it, then who did?
Yeah.
That's one of the main things to look for. Um, and also, I mean, haunted objects can also create such things as like, many other different types of hauntings as well. They can cause like sounds around your house. Um, they can cause opening doors, opening windows, general things like that. Whatever you would experience in a normal haunted house, a haunted object can do as well.
And a good way
Um,
to test the door theory too would be to actually try to lock those or jar the door, right, Andy?
right.
Because if the doors keep opening and you have it locked or latched or something heavy in front of the door, okay, clearly it's more than just a squeaky, creaky, loose door.
Right. Like one of the best ways to tell is, if you put a big heavy object in front of a door to, keep it open, and then suddenly you find that big heavy object moved and the door is closed, chances are something moved to that object,
Yeah.
you know? I mean, I would take that as a very strong indicator.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and like I tell a lot of people, that may talk to me on the day and day, it's like, Schuler, I feel like I have a spirit in my house or a ghost or, something weird and, trickster like, what should I do? And I tell them several different things that they can do. First off, the something simple anyone could do is go out, buy some flowers, real life flowers. If you feel like you have a malevolent entity or something very evil in energy, put these flowers in the area that you think essentially has this energy. And if your flowers die within that day or within the next day or in a unnatural amount of time, essentially, in my personal opinion, you have something very powerful and something not so good. That's not going to happen every time. There's malevolent entities out there that you can have flowers all over the place and they're not going to touch them because I would give a sign that, they're there. But that's just one simple way. And then another thing, Andy, that I like to tell people if they have a spirit, any kind of spirit, and they feel like it can manifest itself to some physical degree, you can put down, a powder or flour, or again to your suggestions about putting large objects in front of doors that move or cabinets, or if you have plates that tend to go from the kitchen to the front room, put those plates somewhere with a heavy book on top. And my best piece of advice is wherever you're doing these little experiments at, set up a camera. Even if you're just going to record for like an hour or a certain amount of time when you go to bed, take the time to look through this or have someone that will look through it for you, and hopefully you're going to get an answer. Then again, you may not, but it's a step in the right direction.
Absolutely. And in fact, another good way you can actually test is with a humidifier.
Really? I have not heard that before, Andy. Please elaborate on that
Yeah.
one.
Well, okay, so as we know, ghosts tend to use electromagnetic energy to manipulate things.
Yeah, yeah.
And a lot of times, like, let's say you've got a spirit in your house. Okay, a lot of times they'll come into your room, they'll keep you up at night, and, they'll throw things or move things or whatever. So, what you want to do, in order to be able to sleep at night, is you take a humidifier and you fire that puppy up in the room, and you make sure that you have it set in the corner of the room, but have it so that it's pointed towards the center of the room so that when it shoots the mist into the air, it's going to cover the entire area.
Hmm.
And if if the activity stops when that humidifier is going, then chances are you've got a spirit on your hands, because what that's doing is it's taking the positive ions out of the air. And without those positive ions, you cannot have electromagnetic energy. And without that electromagnetic energy, spirits can't do anything.
Wow. Andy, I never
So,
even thought about that. That is really impressive. That's
yeah,
something to actually try ourselves, to be honest with you.
that's actually, I've been telling my clients about that for years
Have you?
because, yeah, because I get this question all the time, like, hey, I've got, this spirit who likes to mess with my TV in the middle of the night, or likes to flip on the radio, or likes to throw books around, or what have you, likes to tear off the covers on my bed while I'm trying to sleep,
Yeah.
things like that. And I said, well, have you tried a humidifier? And they'll say, no, what does that do? So I'll explain it to them, and they'll look at me and they'll go, oh yeah, that's actually a very smart idea. So they'll give it a try, and sure enough, it always works.
Nice. That is really
Now,
cool, man.
yeah, and if it doesn't, then chances are you've got something else on your hands.
Yeah.
And if that's the case, contact me again, and we'll come up with a plan B.
Well, Andy,
You
you
know,
saying that kind of gives me a quick epiphany. It's like some of these suggestions that you're giving it, and along with myself, if there's an entity that doesn't interact with these experiments, if you will, or the devices that we're suggesting, my personal opinion, and please put in yours too, is that these entities are extremely intelligent and they know what you're doing. They can hear you, they can watch you, and clearly they're not going to fall for the games. And if that is the type of entity that you have, what would you suggest to move forward with
well,
trying to figure that out?
a lot of the experiments I come up with, like for instance, the whole thing I just mentioned, they wouldn't have a choice because you're taking away their energy. So they would have to comply. They don't have a choice.
Gotcha.
But with things like that, yeah, you do have to be a little more crafty when it comes to intelligent hauntings, because like you said, they do know what you're doing. They're well aware of like your every movement and things like that. They're always watching you and things like that. So, it's it's just a matter of observing them and like going through their emotions, and paying attention to what they're doing, and then taking that and using that to um to basically observe and take report on that. um Now, in terms of getting rid of spirits, that's not usually my area, so I don't deal in that. A lot of times, if that's what the client wants, I will refer them to someone else. But yeah, I mean, that's what I would do. If I have an intelligent haunting, then I would just simply I would observe.
Yeah.
If they're not falling for anything that I'm doing, then yeah, I would just observe and try to learn their tricks.
And along with that too, Andy, trying to watch patterns and look for different little significations about this specific type of entity. Um, I feel, and this goes with actually something Nate just purchased in the past couple of weeks this year, 2020. Um, the SLS system. It's like a motion sensor piece of equipment where it does a live feed. It can take still photography and video, record all that good stuff. But it does a motion sensor of everything in front of the camera. And even if you got a little trickster spirit or whatever this thing may or may not be, I feel like that type of energy, that type of device would be something that would be difficult for it to get away from. Whether it knows what it can do or not, but if it goes right in front of that, coming towards you, going around you, even if it's a quick 1 second glimpse, you're going to see that there is something moving around you in that room, in that location. And
Exactly.
and equipment like that, live motion detection, I feel that would be the best bet to try to capture and prove that there is something around you, even if this thing is avoiding everything else that you're putting out.
Right. There is a lot of factors that go into that though, such as like shutter speed and things like that.
True, true.
But yeah, like I mean in terms of this SLS system, like we were talking earlier, that goes along with like the Xbox Connect and things like that.
Yeah, that's right.
And that would not work for someone like me because to be honest, I've actually tried it. I have an Xbox and I had the Connect for a while, and because of my wheelchair, it would not read me.
Gotcha. Wow.
For some reason, you have to have full mobility throughout your body in order for it to read you. So I had to it was telling me to move my legs, and I was looking at it like, not gonna happen, Captain. Sorry.
Like, really? That's not funny.
Yeah.
What the hell? Wow.
Yeah.
But no, that's a good point, Andy. I did not know that it was needing full detection like that. Now that is regarding a human. Do you think that the same concept would go for a spirit? Like whether it's a spirit that's only half manifested or does it have to be completely manifested? What's your opinion on that?
That's actually a good question, and I don't fully know how to answer that.
Yeah.
But I have noticed, with watching other people who use that system, I have noticed that most of the spirits that come through it are full-bodied when they show up. So I don't know if it would actually work on, say, a half figure or not. That's actually a very, very good question. We're gonna have to test that out.
And that would be something that we'd have to test out. And luckily, with Nate purchasing that, we can do just that. And for our team, this is a new device, a new system that we're getting our hands on ourselves. Clearly, we've had the opportunity to work with other teams and get out in the field, but this is our own device that we're going to actually be able to prepare and take out into the field and get hands-on with, actually do practice after practice after practice. And the more locations we do with it, we can actually make like a little log down and record what we're getting. Are we getting full body apparitions? Are we getting only half apparitions? Are we getting nothing at all, even though our EMF spikes are going crazy and there's no logical, natural energy going through like a power box? But it's going to be an interesting move in the right direction. And along with that, EMF detection, I feel that would be a really good test to put in the field of haunted objects, Andy. Because if you have an object that has an attachment to it, let's say a vase or a book, absolutely no electronic device in it, around it, attached to it, and your EMF detector goes off, that should be the strongest indication that you got something different going on, right?
Well, with the SLS system, you would actually be able to see the entity that is, moving the object and how they're doing it. You'd be able to see the spirit reaching over and grabbing the object and moving it.
Yeah.
Which I think would be kind of funny to watch on screen, to be honest with you. Imagine seeing this figure reach over every once in a while and just go, whoo,
Especially live feed. I mean, I don't know if it'd be as funny to me as it is to you, Andy, but I'd be like, oh my god, there's something moving in front of us right now. We can't see it, but it's literally right here in front of the screen. I'd be freaking out.
To me, it would be kind of funny just to, to me, it would appear that, a spirit would be playing with dolls or whatever, and I don't know, that's just kind of funny to me. I've got a weird sense of humor.
That's all right. Hey, if you laugh, that hopefully will make me comfortable and the rest of the team comfortable to laugh, so we won't be as scared out of our wits.
Right. Right. I mean, dolls don't really bother me. Mannequins, on the other hand, I don't know if I could do mannequins.
Oh man, full body dolls, basically.
Yeah, like full sized, like human sized.
Oh yeah, that'd be a little creepy.
Yeah, no thanks. But like little dolls, yeah, I can handle that. I'm used to dolls, you know. I grew up with sisters, so
Man.
so I'm cool with dolls. But mannequins, that's a whole other story.
So Andy, speaking about dolls and haunted objects, what, in your opinion, I know you said you're not too big on taking it to the level of cleansing or helping a spirit move on or ridding of the entity, but what would be your first stepping stone in the right direction to remove a haunted object or to cleanse it or to calm the energy?
Well, one of the main things I would do first off would be to sage.
Okay.
Either sage or Palo Santo. Now, for those of you who don't know, Palo Santo is a type of wood that comes from South America. And it's basically, it works the same way as sage. You just burn it and you wave it around, and the smoke from it cleanses the area.
What's the
Now,
difference between
when
those
you
two, Andy? Is there different healing properties or?
no, they're pretty much the same. Um, but I believe Palo Santo is a bit stronger.
Okay.
Um, now a very important thing to know though is when you're saging or cleansing an area, you want to at least have some windows open in the area, because what that does is it allows the bad spirits, the bad energy that you're trying to cleanse away, it allows it to escape.
Okay.
So you want to make sure that the windows are open as you're doing this, or maybe even leave the doors open. Um,
Now, Andy, I've heard this theory before, but I've also been told and read that you don't have to have windows and doors open. Now, is that in a situation that you're just cleansing and, rebooting, re-strengthening the energy in the house, and you only have to open the windows and doors when you're ridding of negative energy, or how does that correlate with each other?
well, actually, I've never heard anyone say that you don't have to have the windows open. I've always
Okay.
heard I've always heard to have the windows or doors open.
Just to be
Because,
fair, I've heard that more than not.
yeah, because it allows for the negative energy to escape.
Yeah.
But
I would recommend doing it with the doors and windows open, and not just to let the negative energy out. I mean, that's number one, but to actually get the smoke out.
right, right, yeah, you don't want to end up cleansing yourself out of the area as well.
Exactly. Oh, that'd be terrible,
Yeah.
man. So, what other methods would you go on with, Andy? Do you have any other significant methods that you would practice?
No, that's actually the only one I would suggest.
Okay.
Um, for doing yourself.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, as far as everything else goes, I leave that up to other professionals.
And along with sage, obviously you can kind of throw in, from my personal experience, you can throw in holy water, holy anointing oil,
Mm,
positive vibes from prayer, even crystals and stones. You know,
that is
um,
true.
rubbing them,
There's,
having them on your person. And Andy, I know you're pretty big into crystals. You've helped the team learn a lot more than what we knew originally, because we've had a couple of people follow the team and even join the team that was in the stones and crystals, but you've helped us a lot in the past several months learn a lot more in different kinds of crystals. So are there any significant ones that would stand out?
well, there are all kinds of crystals that are actually very good for absorbing negative energies and, carrying them away. Now, another thing is also you have to cleanse crystals as well. There are some where you don't have to because they naturally cleanse themselves. but there are quite a few where you do. So you want to sage or use Palo Santo on those as well if you go the crystal route. But a lot of the ones that I like to use are things like clear quartz. Clear quartz is a very natural stone that cleanses itself, and it takes all the negative energies around you and absorbs it, and then it releases it, and it turns it into good energy.
Okay.
And there's a lot of other crystals that are good for that too. There's amethyst, black obsidian.
I've heard of black obsidian being actually a really good and one of the more powerful materials to use.
Right, and there's black onyx. Black onyx is very powerful for getting rid of negative energies. That's a very powerful one.
Okay. So Andy, you kind of have me questioning something here. What if you take one of these materials and you place it on top, inside, or you get several of them and place it around a haunted object? Do you think that could potentially cleanse this object, or do you think it'd make matters worse, or possibly nothing at all?
Well, it depends on which materials you use. I mean, it all depends. Like when it comes to crystals, there are certain ones. Um, Now, in terms of Palo Santo and sage, those are very widely used. Crystals are not really used by everyone, but sage is pretty well known as being, part of the paranormal.
Like a purifier, if you will.
Yes, it's very
Okay.
widely used in the paranormal field. And so, yeah, I mean, it all depends on the material that you're using. Now, there are times when it doesn't work as well. So, I mean, it all depends on, first of all, the material you're using, and second, what you're using it for. I mean, I'm just now starting to learn about all this stuff myself because, like, when it comes to all of this stuff that we're talking about right now, like the Palo Santo, the sage, the crystals, and all that, I just started learning about that. I mean, I've been investigating for 30 years and I never used that stuff. It's just not something that I ever thought about. And now I'm starting to get into it. I'm starting to learn about it and use it a lot more.
Wonderful,
So,
Andy.
yeah. So, I mean, as I learn, I will keep everybody else on the team informed of it as well, and even our listeners and things like that who are curious about it as well. We'll keep them informed on it as well because it is a very important thing to know, especially if you're dealing with it.
Oh, absolutely.
It goes along with being able to protect yourself, which is an extremely important thing in the field. Because there's a lot of people who just jump into it and they think, oh, there's nothing to this, and we're gonna be all right, whatever. But that's not always going to be the case. I mean, eventually you're going to run into something that's going to want to do some serious damage.
Oh yeah.
I mean, not everything is Casper the Friendly Ghost.
No, it is not, Andy. No, and
So
it's not always just an empty, dark shell of a abandoned location.
exactly,
Not always.
exactly. So I mean, whatever you do when you go out there, you want to make sure that not only you, but the people you're with, if you're with anybody, is safe. And speaking of which, never ever do this alone.
Oh yeah, absolutely
Never,
not.
never go into a location alone. Because if you ever run into any trouble and you're alone, you're not going to get any help.
No, you're not. No, not in the spiritual world or the physical world. You
Exactly.
you want to be careful and have some backup.
the buddy system is extremely important.
Yes, sir, it is. No, it's not a joke. It's nothing to take lightly when it comes to investigating, paranormal investigating alone, especially abandoned locations or even protected establishments or residentials. And I know some people do it. To each their own. We're not looking down upon you, but kudos to you being brave for one, and also being strong. And for those people that do it, I do hope that they're very well protected physically and spiritually, because it's one thing to be able to protect yourself physically, but it's another when it comes to spiritual attacks, like oppression or even full-on possession, because sometimes you just don't know what's there. And Andy, you're making a great point, because it's another world, literally.
I mean, even if that location is just a simple cemetery, you don't know what type of entities you're going to run into. You just don't know.
Mm-mm. Not one bit.
And I mean, if you're somebody who isn't used to it, and you're just going out there and you're doing this as like an adventure, that's the wrong way to go about it. I'm telling you, because you don't want to just go out there and do this for fun. That's not what it's about. I mean, it's not just to have a good time. If you wanna go out there and investigate, make sure you're doing it with a purpose. Make sure you're doing it with friends. Make sure you're being safe about it, because these spirits that you're tracking down, they're gonna know.
Absolutely.
They're gonna know why you're there, and if they see that you're taking it as a joke or whatever, there's a lot of spirits out there that are gonna take offense. You don't want to offend anything, because just like people, if you offend a person, what are they going to do? Their first instinct is to get angry. So you really got to be careful, and you do have to protect yourself. It's number one priority in any of this. The number one thing you've got to make sure that you do, not only during the investigation, but before it as well. You want to check the location. You want to make sure there's nothing around in the location, so that when you go back and you're going through it in the dark, there's nothing around that you're going to get hurt on, or you're not going to like fall to the floor, or anything like that, because that's a possibility as well. There are lots and lots of dangers in both the physical realm and the spiritual realm that are involved in their paranormal investigation. So, you just really want to make sure that you're well protected.
And speaking from experience too, and I know you can as well, Andy, paranormal investigating and the paranormal world in general is an absolute blast, super fun, but safety is absolutely number one. And
Right.
Jumping into the whole safety thing, it actually correlates with our second piece of topic here. Libraries, for one. Whether you're going to an abandoned library, a library that's still open and established, there are still safety regulations that you want to follow, whether they're personal or it's the owners of the property themselves. Like Andy was saying, you want to be safe, spiritually and physically. And even though it's a library, some people may laugh, joke with that. Libraries can be pretty spooky, especially at night when you're the only people in a library. It can still be dangerous spiritually if there's something there that may have been there for a long time and it wasn't a library. But it's a whole nother game as well. And Andy, what do you think about haunted libraries? And the reason why I kind of mixed this in a little bit is because I did think about haunted objects, and I thought about books. And I know essentially, let's say there is a haunted book or a whole row or aisle of haunted books in a library. That enough is how you make a haunted library.
Well, there are a lot of things that go into creating a haunted location, whether it be a library or pretty much anywhere else. But in my experience with libraries, it could be like a patron who, just loved visiting the library, as I did as a kid. I was Geez, I was constantly at the library. But yeah, I mean, there are lots of people who just love to visit the library. There's a lot of people who are introverted and they feel at home there because they can just sit and be quiet and read, you know? And then there are those who, you know, worked at the library. You know, there could be a librarian who loved her job so much and loved helping people that she just stuck around in death.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, there are just a lot of things that go into it. I mean, it's I could go on all night.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We have 20,000 hours. It's fine. That's what podcasts are for.
Well,
But
I don't have 20,000
I'm just
hours. I
kidding.
mean, I don't know about you.
Not yet, but maybe one day, Andy. It'll be great.
I'm not even sure if I have 20,000 hours left of my life.
Oh
But
my God. Don't say that, Andy. We don't need you keeping us in business, all right?
yeah.
That's not how this is supposed to work.
Oh, all right.
But with that being said, though, so essentially we can have haunted objects, like haunted books, or, maybe an old bookshelf if they build a library out of old parts, whatever. Or we could have emotional attachment, like real human emotion that is keeping them stuck there at that location, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that makes sense a lot to me because Nate has talked several times on this topic about the library that we did investigate, in which he used to work at. And there was that type of attachment. You had employees, you had people that would come in that felt like it was home, it was a refuge of sorts. So, I mean, there is a lot of different attachment from human emotion, and I can see that of why their spirit, their energy would want to remain there.
In terms of what you said about, like building resources that were used to build the library that could have caused it to be haunted, there's a lot of that that's going to go into next week's show, which, by the way, folks, next week's show is going to be a very good one. You guys don't want to miss it. I'm telling you what. But so yeah, I mean, there's a lot of next week's show that's going to talk about that. But yeah, you're absolutely right about that. I mean, it could be that the original library burned down or whatever, and they took salvaged parts to rebuild, or whatever, what have you. But that's a very good point, and that is very, very possible. Because I mean, a haunted object doesn't necessarily have to be a mobile object either.
Yeah.
It could be something as simple as a piece of wood um, that was used to rebuild or whatever. I mean, it could be a nail, it could be a window, it could be anything. I mean, if it's got the ability to absorb that energy, it can be used.
With you saying what you did about the location being reconstructed, I mean, for the most part, myself and people I've talked to, that's not a common conversation when it comes to the paranormal. You don't think about a building being haunted because of like one wooden panel or one window or one doorknob. I mean, you just don't really think that detailed. It's got to be something else. It's got to be the land. Somebody was killed there or a village was pillaged. Old buildings that could have been there, before the library was built or before this home was built. You got possible demonic rituals. There's different things that are more highlighted, I guess, stereotypical things that's been placed out in media that you would imagine. But you're very right, Andy. It could be as simple as one piece of infrastructure, even, that makes an entire location haunted, depending on what energy has been attached to it with that emotion, if you will.
And you're absolutely right. That is one thing that a lot of teams do tend to miss. Because, I mean, despite the fact that it's not something that's commonly thought about,
Yeah.
it is, however, something that is very commonly a factor. So, it should be something it's thought about,
Yeah.
because it's more common than you think.
More commonplace than, yeah, what has been said to be. Or it's just not even thought of.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting to break it down like that, Andy, because, thinking back to all the people I've spoken to, all the locations I've been to, it could have been as simple as a rebuilt structure. It wasn't a murder, it wasn't an object, it wasn't a significant date of time in history that happened. It was, well, something happened in this state, and there was a junker that was selling scrap metal or scrap wood, and this guy was building a new house. He wanted to buy some his materials for cheap, and so he did from this guy. He brought it to this state, this location. He built the house, and then his house was haunted. So now he thinks it's the land, but it was actually the used wood and materials he used. I mean, that's to me, that's mind blowing that it could be that deep. But man, so Andy, going back to the library subject, when you think library being haunted, a library being haunted, minus the Ghostbusters scene with the librarian, the books flying, and Slimer going everywhere, and all that fun, good, stereotypical stuff, what do you think about a haunted library being like? What would you expect?
Well, with me, knowing my experience with it, I would expect misplaced books on occasion. Maybe computers turning on and off on their own. Files on the computer mysteriously popping up. And depending on how old the library is, cards flying out of the card catalogs. They don't even use those anymore, do they?
Not often. I have recently purchased some books from eBay because I've been getting into this book binge of collecting classics and whatnot. And some of these books are actually old library books that have been sold off or, replaced. And they still have their card holders in them. No cards, but the card holders are there. Man, that brings back some memories. We're getting up there, Andy.
Absolutely. And of course, nowadays, though, I don't go to the library as much as I used to. But back in the day, man, I used to live at the library, especially, looking up paranormal things and things like that. I mean, I've been doing this since I was a kid.
Oh, yeah, it was a go-to hobby back in the day, man. It's where you would go to find out about the paranormal.
Exactly. Like, I've been studying the paranormal since I was very young. So, the library was like my home away from home. And so I would go to the library and I would come home and I would tell my parents as we were watching these movies, and I would be telling my family all the time, that's not actually how that would happen. Exactly. Exactly. I learned quite a bit.
And now you're in this paranormal world of everything. Like everything around you, like it's in the movies, it's in the television shows, it's on the internet, it's everywhere, so
yeah, I mean,
it's wild how much it blew up.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the paranormal community is just really grown in the past few decades.
Along with paranormal communities, I've kind of noticed, I've picked up on that libraries are actually very welcoming of paranormal groups. At least in my local area of Indianapolis, there's several libraries, small branches, and even, city-sized branches that are pretty open to the paranormal communities coming in, having events, having small group studies, even doing, public talks. It's really nice that they allow that type of expansion, to
Absolutely.
speak to the community and get people kind of brushed up on it. So that's nice.
And I feel that the reason for that is because of the fact that it is a learning experience.
Yeah.
I think libraries are they're very open and welcoming to things that people can learn from.
Yeah.
And if they're, if they are experiencing these paranormal experiences within that library, then absolutely they're going to want to have people learn about these experiences and what they're about. So I can see why. I would be.
I totally agree with that, Andy. And going back to the haunted objects in libraries real quick, something like I wanted to brush up on before I forgot is when you think about it, some of these books that are circulating through the libraries, especially if you have a library that has an archival section, or they don't throw away their books, or they recycle books, and these are like books that have been circulated since the 1920s, 30s, even 1800s, and they're original editions. Just imagine not only if it's a haunted object, but all the history and all the people that have touched that book. All the different decades and fashions that one object has gone through. It's fascinating. Not only could there be spiritual energy attached to it, but all the history that book has gone through, if you will.
Not to mention that even though those books are so ancient, a lot of them are actually still relevant.
Oh, yes.
I mean, take like the Edgar Cayce books, for instance. A lot of what he wrote in the past and what he went through is still relevant to today. But yeah, I mean, absolutely. With any type of old object, I mean, every time you touch something in life, you're leaving behind an imprint.
Yes, you are.
You're leaving behind that energy, that essence of you. And so, it's very possible.
And that's a valuable piece of information, Andy, that I'm going to take with me for the rest of my life. Is like, you get these objects, and when you can correlate them and compare them, and especially insert them in today's society or into your own personal life, and these things have been produced and used hundreds, if not thousands of years ago, that just says a lot about not only the human race, but the power and the energy of knowledge and how that can carry on for generations. It's really, truly intriguing, how the existence of life can be.
It also, to me, puts more validation into the paranormal field itself. Because, I mean, think of how many centuries people have been going through and experiencing this stuff.
Yeah.
To me, that is validation within itself. I mean, screw the scientific proof. People have been experiencing it for so many hundreds of years. That goes to show that this stuff is real.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, and that is a great point, Andy, because even though all the change and the advances in technology, it's like there are still some things that will not change. And that being such as spirituality and the human knowledge and psyche of how you learn, and history seems to sadly always repeat itself. And it just goes to show, even though we're this great ball of energy, there are some things that can't be changed, and maybe they're not meant to be changed. But
exactly.
That's for us to learn more about and delve into, and I think the paranormal is that gateway, that big book of knowledge, if you will, that we do want to cautiously open up and learn a little bit about.
Well, that's another thing that people always think too, that things that have happened cannot be changed. But, in terms of everything that we do in life, we're constantly changing things.
Absolutely, Andy.
Everything is constantly changing with every movement that we make. I mean, just the simple movement of taking a book off of a shelf and placing it on a table, that is a historic change within itself.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So
it is.
everything is constantly changing. So yeah, I mean, even if something has happened in the past, of course you can change it. I mean, it's just a matter of how. And with that energy comes change all the time.
You know, Andy, with you saying that, the whole energy part, I think the best piece of evidence that anyone in this world can experience to prove that energy is real is that moment in time when you get static shocked just by touching a door. It's like, why would that happen? I touched doors before and I don't get shocked. It should be like that all day, every day throughout the rest of my life. But there are moments when there's enough energy, quote unquote, main point, main key word here, energy, going on between you and that door or whatever object you're about to touch. Shock happens. Even when you touch another person, another flesh and blood and bone human being that's not metal, that's not aluminum or anything, you touch each other and you get shocked.
Exactly. I mean, it's all about circumstance.
Yes, sir, it is, Andy. So, Andy, do you have anything else that you would like to throw out for the rest of us, the audience, myself, that you'd like to cover for today's podcast?
Nothing that I can think of offhand that we haven't already covered. I mean, my main thing today was just to make sure that people knew about the safety issues that are part of the paranormal. Because, I mean, when it comes to the paranormal, that is the number one most important thing you can learn. This is why I tell people that when you first start out in the paranormal, don't just jump into doing investigations. What I would do is you go to the library, you pick up as many books as you can, and you just read and you study. I mean, the first 2 years of my career were spent in the library. I didn't even do investigations for those 2 years. All I did was study because I wanted to know what I was getting myself into. I mean, that's one of the most important things you can do to keep yourself safe, is to just know what you're doing and know how to go about it and know what you're dealing with before you deal with it. Because if you just jump into it, you don't know what you're doing, you're in for a rude awakening at times.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it may not always happen, but it will happen.
Yeah, I know I learned that the hard way personally, Andy. And I do agree with you. For people that are starting out on investigations and a paranormal team or anything paranormal, take your time. Watch videos, talk to people, listen to podcasts, read books, all that good stuff. Reach out to people like myself and Andy. And if you really, really can't wait a couple years to go on a paranormal investigation and you just want to jump into it, we highly recommend you reach out to a paranormal team before making your own, or collaborating with another team if you're going to start your own team, and get people with experience to get that guidance, to get that security, and then to really know what to do instead of just going out there like I did and just being like, okay, I watched a TV show, a couple times. I binge watched like 20 episodes. I know what I'm doing. When in actuality, I ended up having a negative entity come after me, and it taunted me. It messed with me for a little over a month, and that was enough for me to learn the hard way on protection and cleansing and being completely and utterly careful.
Exactly. I mean, and even before you contact a team to learn, just make sure that you go to the library, read some books. Books are actually one of the best sources that you can get information from. Don't worry about what all these TV shows are doing, because a lot of these TV shows may not even be telling you the truth.
Yeah.
So what I would do is I would go to books, articles, word of mouth, talk to people who've been in the field. But what I would do is I would get the information first. Get as much information as humanly possible. And then start breaking into, okay, I want to learn how to do this. Because, I mean, even though you start off with that strong urge to get out there and do it, you want to fight that urge.
Mm-hmm.
You want to fight that urge because you can't just, this is not something you can just jump into. This takes years and years of study. It really does.
Yes, it does, Andy. And you know, Andy, with there being not really necessarily a large amount of schools that offer paranormal training, if you will, paranormal 101, I have read up that there are some schools that kind of delve into like spirituality and paranormal investigating and whatnot. But I guess you can't really, I hate saying this, but you can't really officially call paranormal investigating a quote unquote legal or real profession, at least not yet. So when it comes to people being schooled or learning this type of stuff, what I suggest and what I try to reach out to people to be a very important factor is listen to podcasts like ours or other fellow podcasts like Jim Harold's Campfire or even Ron's Amazing Stories. You know, they have a lot of good content, a lot of real experiences that you can listen to and kind of write some notes down and go from there. And then Andy's number one rule, read books. Go out there, get paranormal books about possession, about demonology, about angelic encounters, about healing and cleansing methods. I mean, read up on that stuff. And once you make all this, you know, all these different connections, you make your notes, that's when you need to reach out to the paranormal community or even reach out to them beforehand and they can help guide you as well. And you can ask people questions, you can compare notes, you can compare methods and techniques. And the more you communicate with these people that are just as serious and that take everything to a safe measure, such as yourself, you're going to find yourself on that right path. So you will be in a safe environment and you'll make the right decisions. Because, Andy, let me say, man, the world that we live in physically is a quite dangerous place. But when it comes to spiritual dangers, that is a whole nother type of ball game, man, that is just more difficult to avoid and get yourself healed up from.
Right, and like I said, though, I mean, most of the time, you're not only dealing with spiritual dangers, but you're dealing with real-world dangers as well, simultaneously.
Oh, yeah.
So you have to really know the locations that you are investigating. You know, when you go to investigate a location, number one, you want to make sure that you know the area, so that one, you don't get lost. And two, you don't get hurt. And then what you want to do is you want to make sure that you're well aware of activity that have been going on there so that you know what to expect. But don't take that at face value either, because that can change. Especially if you're dealing with an intelligent haunting, because an intelligent haunting will change up the activity, just mess with that.
And like you said, with physical elements too and dangers on that, Andy, you gotta not only watch out for people or decrepit buildings, but you got things like bat guano. Like, that might be something to laugh at, but bat poop, that can make you very sick. Any type of animal feces that's been lingering around, the vapors can cause you to get sick. You got black mold, you've got lead, you've got all this different stuff, you know, and you want to be careful. Asbestos, that's another high up ranked danger. You want to be aware of your surroundings and the location, like Andy was saying. So even before, you may not be able to find these in any books. Some locations you go to may be forgotten, abandoned, or if there was any documentation, they're long gone. But what you'll want to do is go to these locations, make sure you have all the equipment that you can, safety hazards, you know, whether it's a jumpsuit or you have a first aid kit, a respirator, your charcoal filters, and do your research on the area, check it out during the day, and try to get a feel of what you're going to have to deal with on the physical aspect, and then obviously prepare for the spiritual side too, because it can be challenging, to say the least. And this equipment too, you may not need these for every location. You may not need them at all, depending on what type of category of location you choose to do. But the biggest point Andy and I are trying to get across is it's not hurt to have this type of equipment. And a lot of it's not all that expensive. Some might be, depending on brands and, you know, what they can do and all that good stuff. But for the most part, they are not expensive. We have a lot of this, our paranormal team here in Indy. And it's good to have on hand. It never hurts to be too prepared. So that's the main point we're trying to get across. You don't have to look like a Ghostbuster every time. But hey, I mean, if you're happy with it, I mean, that's good too, right, Andy?
Right. And good luck finding a proton pack on Amazon.
Yeah. Sadly, we haven't got to that technology yet. But I mean, in due time, fingers crossed, Andy. Well,
Well,
Andy, I think we have pretty much wrapped on for a good amount of time. Hopefully, we didn't lose too many people in the audience. Hopefully, we covered a lot of good topics and corners. What do you think?
yeah, I hope we didn't lose anybody with my rant or, anything like that. But I just want to say one more thing though,
Go ahead.
because in terms of like inexpensive things that you were talking about, there are a lot of people who come to me and they'll ask me like, well, I want to get ghost equipment, but it's too expensive. What do you recommend? And I'd say, well, first off, I'd recommend string. I'd recommend cotton balls. I'd recommend baby powder or flour. I'd recommend wind chimes, because I mean, all that stuff can be used. I mean, you can use things as simple as pens and pencils, or even a jump rope or a wall. It doesn't have to be anything super, super expensive to be seen as paranormal equipment. You can use normal, everyday household stuff. You can wad up a ball of paper and use that as a tool.
From what you've told us too in the past couple months, Andy, there's a lot of techniques that people either don't use anymore or they've never thought to use, and it actually works really well in the paranormal world and the whole field of investigating.
Right.
But yeah, Andy, you make a good point on that. For people that are starting out, I'm sure a lot of people, if not everyone, in this modern day world that's into the paranormal, they have a phone, and with the things and the techniques that Andy has suggested to use that are inexpensive, there's your gear, there's your equipment, and then your main piece to try to build all this evidence and save it to compile into one thing is going to be your phone. There's your still photography, your videos, and then everything that you have before you to do different experiments. That's what you use to lure them. That's what you can use as bait to try to bring them into this interactive realm, and then use your phone to try to record it, and then there you go. And then you can go from there. And as you save money or you progress with other people, you can learn to practice with different equipment, because a lot of the more scientific and advanced devices, they're not cheap. Just be straight honest with you. It is unfortunate, but that's just the way it is right now. But there are other methods you can take.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be the most expensive thing in the world for you to go out there and investigate. So, don't worry about buying all this equipment, because you basically don't need it. It's helpful, but you don't need it.
No, you do not. So, Andy, with next week's podcast coming up, how excited would you rate yourself on 1 to 10?
On a scale of 1 to 10, I'd say about 105.
That's pretty... Wow. That's pretty damn high, I have to say.
I'm telling you, man, next week is going to be great.
Yeah, Andy, I have to say I'm looking forward. The entire team is looking forward to our next episode on the podcast. And hopefully everyone has enjoyed this podcast, and hopefully it's reached out to the right people and helped them or encouraged them or backed them up on their own thoughts and methods. But next week's going to be fun. We're going to have a guest. It's about all that we can say right now, but it's going to be a blast. I mean, like always. But without releasing too much more, I think we're going to have to sadly put the podcast to an end here, especially before we start sending out bloopers to everyone. Not bloopers, what am I saying? There's a blooper for you. Spoilers. I meant to say spoilers. Well, guys, let's go ahead and do the original run through here. If you want to reach out to the team, message us, contact us, get on the podcast, investigate with us, all that good stuff. You have questions, concerns, or comments, simply type in PILT Paranormal in the Google search bar, and you will find everything there pop up from our website, Facebook, Instagram, and the podcast, and other fun outlets that we're attached to, just like a haunted object. And of course, we'll reach back out to you as soon as possible, and especially if you have topics for the podcast or you have comments, we'd love to share that or get that on board as well and go from there. Andy, I have to say, today's podcast has been pretty fun. I had a blast, and it's good to be back where we belong. What do you think?
Absolutely. This is actually one of my favorite topics, so I really enjoyed tonight's episode.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, me too, man. Just like always, I always have a blast talking with you and talking about the paranormal.
Absolutely.
Well, everyone out there, thank you once again for listening, and please stay tuned in for upcoming podcasts and keep up with the team. And until next time, stay frosty, and we'll talk to you then.